Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Grammar 2, an advanced grammar course from the Islamic University presented by Rifat Al Ariyah. Today, we have probably the most significant of all sessions, of all classes, a session on sentence structure and sentence type. Now, last time we differentiated between two significant things in a sentence: the phrase, which is basically a group of words with uh, no no finite verb, and the clause, which could be either dependent, subordinate, or independent and main. The subordinate or dependent clause is again basically a group of words with a verb, but this chunk of the sentence does not give a full meaning, a full thought. Therefore, it cannot stand alone, which means in academic writing, it's wrong to say, for example, because he was sick. I know in conversational English, you could simply say uh, because he's sick. Answer a question: Why is Ali absent? But this is actually a short answer to a longer answer, which should be Ali is sick because Ali is absent because he is sick. The independent or main clauses can stand alone. You could say Ali is sick. It gives a thought, at least one thought. So today we'll talk about sentence structure. Basically, we have three main sentence types. Some people insist on including the fourth type, the compound complex. We have the simple sentence, the compound sentence, and the complex sentence. So the question is, when you write, what kind of sentence should you be using? Uh, all simple sentences is childish and bad style. All compound sentences could be boring. All complex sentences also could be, in a way, confusing, if not boring. So the key issue here is to mix and vary. But basically, English depends more on subordinating than any other thing. So I would suggest that students use more complex sentences than compound and simple sentences. Let's say, and I'm just suggesting you write 100 sentences, and you say of 100 sentences, around 50, 60 of them should be complex sentences, and then you have like around basically 30 of them compound, and the rest probably 10, uh, 15, maximum 20% of the sentences should be simple. These are not laws, these are not like basic rules, but because English basically depends on subordinating, you should use more complex sentences than simple and compound. But again, it depends on why you're writing, what text you're writing, who you are writing for. So the simple sentence is basically a subject verb relationship. One verb and one subject. That's the issue. There's one relationship between these two elements. A sentence like, I graduated from the Islamic University with a BA in English, there should be a full stop here because remember, a sentence begins with a capital and ends with a full stop. I graduated is the basic subject verb relationship. I graduated. I finished school. I finished university. And everything else we add is a phrase. Remember, we said a phrase adds more information. So, from the Islamic University of Gaza with a BA in English literature, phrases that give more specific information. I am a doctor, birds fly, smoking kills, grammar is easy, all simple sentences. Look, we have one verb each. Again, it doesn't mean a simple sentence has to be short or is always short, because you can go as long as 3 lines and still it's a simple sentence because you have one main verb. Every day, early in the morning, I, along with my family and friends, go to the beach to swim for 2 hours. The main verb is go, and everything else is either a phrase or a prepositional phrase or an infinitive. The subject is I. These are more simple sentences. Joe went to the store. Joe subject, went verb. Sarah and Jesse. Look at this. This is called compound subject because Sarah and Jesse are still they. Are going swimming. Are going is the verb. Again, we're not talking about tenses here. We're talking about a finite verb. The frog jumped and landed in the pond. This is a simple sentence. I noticed that some academic writing books could classify this as a compound sentence, but it's not. Because if you look carefully here, you have one subject, which is the frog. The frog jumped, and landed is actually added to the verb. If you want to make it a compound sentence, you go for the frog jumped and it landed. In this case, it's a compound sentence. But so number three is simple because the subject is not repeated after and. Can I have some juice? The verb is can have. Simple. The pizza smells delicious. There's a fly in the car with us. Is the verb. Look on top of the refrigerator for the key. There's no subject here because it's implied in an imperative sentence. I am out of paper for the printer. Am is the verb. Will you help? Question form still a simple sentence. Will help is the verb. The music is too loud for my ears. Is the verb. Now this is the simple sentence. Now look at this. A compound sentence is basically two simple sentences. But if you say this, the definition is incomplete and you end up producing wrong sentences. Now, the key issue here is how we link these sentences, these simple sentences together to make bigger sentences and sentences of different varieties. So the issue here is these two sentences have at least two sentences, could be three or more, have to be joined with a connector. And the connectors that make compound sentences are actually not that many. They're called coordinators. Coordinators coordinate because they connect two equally important, two equally independent clauses. The coordinators are uh, usually summarized or I don't know how to say it, but they are in the word fanboys plus the semicolon. Look at the semicolon, it's significant. So fanboys stands for, this is an acronym actually. Fanboys is an acronym taking the first letter of the seven significant coordinators. If from for, A and in, nor, B, but, O or Y yet, is, so, plus the semicolon. For means because, and when you add information, we have for and so, cause and effect. But and yet are basically the same. I'll say the difference in a bit. Or when you have options, or sometimes you're warning somebody. I'll give you examples in a bit. And nor for negative structures. Now, look at this. A very important point to understand here is if you say, let me write this down for you. If you say, uh, I study English, I live in Rafah, academically speaking, this sentence is wrong. And this is a very, very important piece of information. In logically, if somebody says, I study English, I live in Rafah, there's nothing wrong with that. The grammar is correct. But when you write it down and you realize that there is a comma here, it makes it wrong. Why? Simply speaking, because the comma does not connect sentences. If you remove the comma, still, this is a comma splice, okay? This is a run-on sentence. The sentence is still wrong. It's still wrong because there is no connector. So when you add a simple sentence plus a simple sentence and you don't connect them properly, you end up writing wrong sentences. I know in Arabic we don't care sometimes, but sadly about punctuation marks. But in English you have to be very, very accurate. Again, this sentence is wrong. I want to succeed, comma. I study very hard. Notice you don't say I study very hardly. Hardly is negative, but hard means you study a lot. If you remove the comma, still sentence is wrong. Why? Because these are two main clauses, two simple sentences that are put together, but they're not properly connected. So these are examples of simple sentences connected with fanboys, and then they become compound. I went to the market for I wanted to buy a sandwich. For means because, but if you add because, the sentence is basically the same meaning, but it becomes a different type. I went to the market for I wanted to buy a sandwich. It could become I wanted to buy a sandwich, so I went to the market. I am waiting for you promised to come. If you look at these two sentences, I went subject verb, I wanted to buy subject verb, I am waiting subject verb, you promised subject verb. So the idea is that you have subject verb, fanboys in the middle, and then yet another fan, another subject verb, and another main clause. You promised to come, so I am waiting. I wanted to buy a sandwich, so I went to the shops. He likes tea, but he dislikes coffee. He is very weak, yet he is very brave. There are two differences between but and yet. First, yet is less frequently used than but, which makes it, basically more articulate sometimes. But don't overuse it. Yet also has an element of surprise. So a man who's weak is not generally expected to be brave. If you talk about somebody who studied for 4 months, you would say, for example, she studied for 4 months, yet she failed. So the thing after yet comes as a surprise. A very important point I like to highlight here is that this element of surprise is relative. It's relative, it means I could be surprised and somebody else couldn't be surprised. So two different people could write the same sentence and could use two different connectors. And both of them could be correct because of how different things are to different people. So if, for example, the example I just gave, he studied for 4 months, yet he failed. I'm surprised. But if I know that this student is not good, he doesn't concentrate much, he's very playful, childish. Even when he studies or she studies, he's just not focusing. It could be, and I know that about this person, so you could say he studied for 4 months, but he didn't succeed. When you use or, again, there are either options or a warning. I want to buy this, or I want to buy that. Students would ask here, why don't I say, I want to buy this or that? You could say that, but this becomes a simple sentence because the subject is not repeated. Come on time, or I will tell your mom. So there's a warning here. So look at these three sentences here at the bottom. I like tea and coffee, simple. I like tea and like coffee, still simple because the subject is not repeated. I like tea and I like coffee because I like. It doesn't have to be repeating the same subject or the same verb. So you could say, to make it compound, you could say, for example, I like tea and he likes coffee, still correct. Or dislikes coffee, still correct. She likes English, but he, for example, dislikes English. So these three sentences are compound sentences. If you notice, if you go back, you'll notice that before fanboys, we use a comma. It's an optional comma. And also, please, there's no space before the punctuation mark. Look at this. There's no space. The space comes after the punctuation mark, not before it. The space after the punctuation mark, not before it. This is significant for typing. So you could use a comma before the fanboys, but it's optional. If you take it out, it's up to you. But the rule is that the smaller the two sentences are, the more likely you remove this comma. Like this here, you shouldn't use it because these two sentences are tiny, small. So if you use it, it's not a big deal. Now, I delayed nor because there's an issue about nor. When you use nor is a negative word. Usually in English, if you begin a clause with a negative word, like nor, hardly, not only, but also, barely, scarcely, never, you use a question format after that, subject, verb, and virgin. The subject comes before the verb. Probably I can give you an example before I talk about this. So you could say, Palestinians will never surrender. This is a beautiful sentence. It's not will not, because will never is even stronger. But look at this trick to make it more eloquent, to make it more emphatic. If you begin the sentence with never, you need to change the order of the words. We call it subject, verb, and virgin, where the, the subject is no longer before the verb. You know, in English, the subject is almost always before the verb, unless you use a question format or other structures. This is one of the structures that you have to change. So it becomes, never will Palestinians surrender. This is more emphatic. And some people say never ever. So if you hide never, it's like a question. Will Palestinians surrender? But with no question mark. So I can't swim, nor can I dive. In nor, there must always be negative in the first clause. I can't swim, nor can I dive. I will not visit him, nor will I send a gift. She didn't come to class, nor did she do her homework. Now, look at this. The semicolon, very interesting thing about the semicolon. Sadly, uh, many students think that the semicolon is just used when the relationship between the two clauses is strong. Actually, when you write a paragraph is a group of related sentences. So when you write a paragraph, all sentences are related, and there is a strong relationship between all sentences. So we'll see what happens to the semicolon and what it means. So again, if you say, I study English, I study French, correct, simple, simple. If you use a semicolon without even any of the fanboys, it's a compound sentence because the semicolon is used to connect two clauses. Look at this. To the left, you have subject verb. To the right, you have subject verb. And in the very middle, you have the semicolon. It's like you're using one of the fanboys. But this sentence, number three, sorry, number three is wrong because there's no connector. And number four is even worse because some people think that the comma is a connector. It's not, it doesn't connect. To fix these sentences, three and four, you could simply add a semicolon or a full stop, or you add one of the fanboys in the very middle. I study English and I study French. Now look at the semicolon. If you think of this sentence, this is an interesting sentence here. I usually in classes I give it to the students as an exercise, but probably we can think together here. Look at this. She studies English. He studies French. Now, what is the relationship? I want you to think, to pause this video and think of the relationship between the two sentences. Cause and effect. Is the second one giving information? Is it a contrast? Is it an option? Think about it. Pause the video and think about it. Look at this. When you say she studies English, full stop, he studies French, or with a semicolon, the relationship is actually not clear. It's vague. Okay. So if you want to replace the semicolon with any of the fanboys, what fanboys can you use to replace the semicolon without changing the words or the word order? Nothing. Just remove the semicolon, add any of the fanboys. You can use the optional comma before that. I'll give you a hint. You can't use nor because nor, remember, requires negative in the first clause. Okay, if you pause this video and thought about this, let's see the surprise here. Actually, every one of the fanboys can be used to replace the semicolon except nor, remember, because there's no negative. But again, this is going to change the meaning of the sentence, the two clauses, the meaning, the context. She studies English, so he studies French. If we're talking about two brothers, sorry, a brother and a sister, and one of them has to choose something and the other something else. So as a result, and if so is can be used, for can also be used. She studies French, for he studies French. She studies French, for he studies. Sorry, she studies English, for he studies French. It changes the meaning, like changing what the cause is, what the effect is. She studies, if you want to emphasize the contrast, if you talk about twins, for example, look like each other, they always do things like each other, but now at university, somebody is doing something different. You focus on the contrast. She studies English, but he studies French. And if there's an element of surprise here, you could say, yet he studies French. If everything they've been done together so far is the same or almost the same, but at university they're doing something different. And if you just want to add information, she studies English, he studies French. And finally, again, in a very strange, again, I'm just stretching my imagination here. She studies English or he studies French. Let's assume, how the uh, financial crisis here in Gaza plaguing the people, families unable to pay fees for their daughters and sons. So if the father here is talking to the mother and they only have money to send one of the kids to university, the man will be saying, she studies English or he studies French. So he's giving an option here. And that's why semicolon, I know many people who always like to use semicolon, semicolon, semicolon. In academic writing, the first key is to be clear and to the point. Try not to be ambiguous. So the semicolon could add some ambiguity here. Don't do it. In a bit, I'll show you how, when you use the semicolon, what to do in order to be clearer. But try to use it sparingly. There's no rule here, but if you use it once in a paragraph, maximum twice in a long paragraph, that would be fun. Again, more examples. I'll read just some of them so you can have time to read the rest. Sarah walked to class, but Kevin ran. I want hamburgers, but Louise wants pizza. The photographer held up a bear, and the little boy smiled, etc., etc. So look at this sentence also. It's also a compound sentence because of the semicolon. Remember, subject verb, in the middle fan boys or semicolon, and then subject verb. More compound sentences. More compound sentences. Actually, they are the same. Now look at this. A complex sentence, finally, is again two simple, at least two simple sentences connected together with a connector. So it's basically the same definition of a compound sentence. How's that, and why is that? Uh, the difference is that with a compound sentence, we have a coordinator, we have a fan, boys, but in a complex sentence, we have a subordinator. And I'll again ask you, I'll give you time to tell me what subordinate or what the main subordinators you're familiar with. What are they? So pause the video, ladies and gentlemen, and try to list the subordinators you know, the subordinators, the linking words that make sentences complex. That when you use them, the clause loses its thought, basically. Like again, for example, because he is sick, Okay, doesn't give a full thought because it's still hanging in there. Okay, I hope you pause the video and try to guess, because students, and I created here three columns because students always make a huge mistake. If you fix this mistake, your English is going to improve tremendously. Look at this table I had prepared earlier. These are the subordinators. Actually, there are like, I don't know, probably 100 of them in English. It's easy to memorize the coordinators because they're just fanboys, basically, and semicolon. But sadly, sometimes students confuse between the subordinators, the transition signals, and the prepositions. The prepositions, the transition signals are not connectors. They don't make simple sentences or compound or complex sentences. We use them, and they could have the same meaning basically. But it's wrong to link sentences with the transition signals or the prepositions. I'll show you in a bit. But let's focus on these. So you say, while I was driving, I almost ran a flock of sheep. Or I almost ran a flock of sheep while I was driving. When he came late, the teacher uh, gave him a notice or something. Although although he was late to the exam or whatever, he scored a full mark. He scored a full mark although he was late because he was sick. He was absent. He was absent because he was sick. Unless, meanwhile, I'll delete meanwhile something I don't want to talk about. Unless meaning if not, wherever you go, he follows you. And then who, which, that, whose. The man who was carrying the baby is my cousin. The book which you told me about is interesting. After and before, as and since, till, until, long list. However, however, therefore, as a result, also, hence, thus, for instance, for example, further, furthermore, in addition, additionally, these are not connectors. I'll show you in a bit. And also, there are words that students sadly think are connectors, but they're not. They're prepositions. Despite, in spite of, because of, due to, owing to. These are prepositions. So the sentence, because of his sickness or because of being sick, notice after these we have a phrase, either a noun phrase or a gerund. Because of his sickness, because of being sick, there's no subject, there's no verb here. He is absent. So this is a simple sentence actually. There's no one subject verb relationship. Despite his absence, he succeeded. So these are more subordinators: one, since, that, though, until, wherever, whenever, whatever, because, etc. These are examples of complex sentences. When I grow, I want to be a ballerina. I want to be a ballerina when I grow. If you stop here after when I grow up, when I grow up, uh, it doesn't give a full thought. It's wrong. And then it's better to use the optional comma. If you begin with a subordinator, you usually use the optional comma here. If the subordinator, the subordinate clause is in the second part of the sentence, you don't have to use a comma. If you use it, it's okay. So I will get to watch television after I clean up the dishes. We won the game because it was played well. After our coronavirus lockdown, I was excited to see my friends again. Sarah cried when her cat got sick. When Sarah's cat got sick, she cried. The sun, which has been absent for days, is shining through the clouds. The poem the author is talking about is a masterpiece. Look at number 7. Could be tricky here. There's no subordinator because it is deleted when when which or who or whom or that are used for object. You can delete them, and it's beautiful. So the poem is subject, is a masterpiece, is the verb, and then the author is subject, and is talking is the other verb. So this is originally the poem which the author is talking about is a masterpiece. Again, warning: these transition signals are not connectors. They don't connect sentences. I'll show you examples in a bit. And this is the long list. Pay attention to then and also, because I know many of you always prefer to say also, then, also, then, also, then. Please try to vary your connectors, try to vary your sentence structure, and write properly. So this sentence is wrong. What? Why? Because also is not a connector, and the comma is not a connector either. I like English, also I like French. Wrong. I studied English, I studied, then I slept. Also, academically, this is wrong. It can be fixed like this. I liked English and also I like French. I like English and also like French, compound. I studied English and then I slept, compound. I like English, semicolon, also I like French, compound because it's semicolon. I studied English, then I slept, compound because of the semicolon. Look at these. This is very important. Ali worked hard, semicolon. However, he failed. This is a compound, not because of the of however or the comma after it, but because of the semicolon. And notice most of the transition signals can move between the subject and the verb or at the end of the clause. So compound, compound, compound because of the semicolon. Look, when we move the however or for example or for instance or therefore, you don't move the semicolon. Ali worked hard, he however failed. By the way, you can delete this comma, it's optional. You can delete these two commas, they are optional. But if you delete one, you delete the other. If you use one, you use the other. Ali worked hard, semicolon, he failed, however. And this is beautifully used. When you delete at the end, it comes as a surprise to the reader. The same sentences can be rewritten to make simple, simple. Look at this. In the middle, we have a full stop, full stop, full stop. So simple plus simple, simple plus simple, simple plus simple. These sentences are all wrong. Focus on these because these are significant. Ali worked hard, comma, he failed, wrong. No connector, the comma doesn't connect. Ali worked hard, comma, however, he failed is also wrong. Why? Because the comma doesn't connect. And even however is not a subordinator or a coordinator. You can fix this by saying semicolon, he failed, or full stop, capital, however. Or you could say Ali worked hard and however he failed, or but however he failed. Yes, you can say but however. Ali worked hard, comma, then wrong because then is not a connector. You could say full stop, then capital, or semicolon, then, or comma, and then it's compound. Ali studied hard, thus he succeeded. Also grammatically standard English wrong. Ali studied hard, semicolon, thus he succeeded, or full stop, capital, thus. Ali studied hard, comma, also he succeeded is wrong because also is not a connector. So look at how different connecting words or transition signals could have the same meaning but end up creating different sentences due to, owing to, because of. They mean because, they mean for, they mean since, they mean as, but they create different sentences, sometimes simple, sometimes compound, sometimes complex. In spite of and in spite could basically mean yet, but, however, on the other hand, though, although, even though, but create different sentences. Okay, these are prepositions due to, owing to, because of, despite, in spite of are prepositions that followed, they're not followed with clauses. Despite her absence, look at this, despite her absence or despite being absent, it's correct, but this is a simple sentence because we have one verb. Look at this sentence, this is wrong. You don't say despite she was absent because despite shouldn't be followed with a subject verb, a clause. You could say despite being absent, despite her absence, or you just delete despite and you use although she was absent, she did well in her exam, or you just delete it all together, say she was absent, semicolon, or full stop, she did well in her exams, or she was absent, comma, but she did well in her exams, or yet she did well in her exams. You either make it compound or using fanboys, or complex using one of the subordinators, or you just split it in half and add a full stop at the end. So these sentences are different but similar. He is absent for he is sick. Compound sentence. He is sick, so he's absent. Compound sentence. Basically the same meaning, but it's complex because we use because. Notice there's an optional comma before the fanboys, but there's no optional comma before because. But if you use it, it's not a big deal. He is sick, therefore he is absent. Simple, simple. He is sick, semicolon, therefore his absent is compound. Due to his sickness, he is absent, simple. He is absent because of his sickness, still simple, because we have one main verb. Again, different sentences, different structures, but basically the same. Not 100%, probably 90%, 95%, 99%. But let's see. She likes coffee, comma, yet she likes coffee, yet she dislikes tea. She likes coffee, comma, but she dislikes tea. Again, here yet less fewer people use yet, so it makes it, you look special when you use yet, but don't overuse it. You'll spoil the fun. And again, it has an element of surprise. She likes coffee, semicolon. She dislikes tea, compound. She likes coffee, semicolon. However, she dislikes tea. This sentence here, okay, I'll number them. This sentence number 4 is compound because of the semicolon, not because of however. If you delete, however, the sentence is correct. If you delete the semicolon, the sentence is incorrect. She likes coffee, full stop. However, she dislikes tea, simple, simple. She likes coffee, nevertheless, semicolon, nevertheless, she dislikes tea, compound because of semicolon, simple, simple. Look at this complex sentence. Although she likes coffee, comma, she dislikes tea, complex because of although. What about this sentence? Despite liking coffee, she dislikes tea. This is a simple sentence because it has one verb. Okay, there's an exercise here. What type of sentence is this? More, I'll wait a bit here, so probably you can pause and look at these sentences. I'll post them on the Facebook group so you can try to answer them. So just say whether this is a complex, compound, or simple sentence. There are links here for more exercises online. Now look at these very advanced sentences that you will be required to know, understand. Now this sentence, remember, these two sentences are wrong. Why? Because we have two main clauses and no connectors. The comma doesn't connect, remember. If you look at this sentence, it's correct because there's a connector and. If you look at this sentence, it's correct, compound, this is compound, this is compound, correct because there is a semicolon. But look at this sentence, very important. Again, I number them to make it easier for you. This one, is it correct or incorrect? Okay, I'll stop here, pause the video. Is number 5 correct or incorrect? Mm-hmm. Correct or incorrect? Number 5, think about it. Pause the video and think about it. Number 5 is definitely correct. Some people might think number 5 is like number 1 and 2, but no. In number 5, we have which, and which is a subordinator. Yeah, it's not a big difference between which and them, but them is a pronoun and which is a subordinate. So number 5 is definitely correct. Now, there is an exercise here. Look at this. It's beautiful how now you can rewrite the same sentence, the same idea in many different ways. I'll give you your first piece of assignment, and I want you to choose one of these sentences, either this one or this one. This is actually a sentence, but this is not. And to write it in 30 different ways, either or, not both of them. Try to write simple sentences, compound sentences, complex sentences, etc. So I'll give you a hint. Narrow is the way, few the number. If you make it like few is the number, narrow is the way, this is a sentence. Narrow is the way, or the way is narrow, full stop. The number is few, this is another sentence. If you say the number is few because the way is narrow, this is a complex sentence, correct? Okay, the number is few, comma, for the way is narrow, that's another compound sentence connected with for fanboys. The same with my castle. My castle, my rules, from famous movie, The King's Speech. My castle, my rules. Now, if you look at this, how many ways can you rewrite this sentence? This, whatever it is. I think 100 ways or more. Basically, just like let's assume that the original sentence is this is my castle. Notice we say this because castle is singular. These because rules are. These are my rules. So let's assume that this is the original sentence. I want you to rewrite it in 30 different ways. Try not to change the words, just the connectors. Make it simple, make it compound, make it complex, the way you like. Here there is cause and effect relationship. So if you say, for example, this is my castle, comma, so these are my rules. This is my castle, semicolon, therefore, comma, these are my rules, etc., etc. Now I want again to emphasize this idea that this sentence is incorrect because the comma doesn't connect. I don't understand this point, semicolon, please explain to me, correct. Because I don't understand the point, please explain it to me, it's correct. Or it could be this way. This is also correct, but it is uh, connected. Okay, wait a minute. I don't understand this sentence, so please explain it to me. This is compound, but this is wrong. Look at this. This is wrong because you shouldn't use a semicolon. This is important. Shouldn't use a semicolon in a complex sentence. Only compound sentences. There should be a main clause to the right, a main clause to the left, and this is also wrong. Here, this way, this is also wrong. Why? Because simply the first sentence doesn't stand alone. The first clause doesn't stand alone. Why? Because it's a dependent clause. You don't say because I don't understand this point. Full stop. You have to continue. One last point. I skipped something here. I'll have to find it somewhere. Okay, this way. Usually again, students confuse between types of sentence of commas. Remember, the comma between two clauses is wrong, doesn't connect alone unless you use a fanboys. But there is a different comma, introductory comma, or whatever. The comma gives a pause. And the basic rule is that the comma is almost always optional. You can delete it. It doesn't make a difference. But you should use it in many places in academic writing to make your writing easier. Okay? So finally, he passed away, correct. Finally, he passed away, also correct. This comma is not a connector. It's an introductory comma. But you should use it, especially in academic writing. If you delete the comma in a place and this deletion changes the meaning, it means you can't delete the comma. Look at this sentence. Saeed, Ali, Rami, and Hani were late. Saeed, Ali, Rami, and Hani were late. The difference between 1 and 2 is that we use the Oxford comma. If you count 3 things or more and use and or, the comma before and the last and the and here or the or is optional. It's called the Oxford or the Oxford comma or the serial comma because you count things. Now, if you delete any of these commas, not the one before and because it's optional, you're going to change the meaning. If we have Saeed 1, Ali 2, Rami 3, Hani 4. So we have 4 people. If we have 4 people and you write it this way, Saeed, Ali, Rami, and Hani, it's going to change the meaning because this is three people. Look at how you use it in English to call for people. In poetry, you say, "Oh, Rose, thou art sick." In English, you use a comma. In Saeed, have you seen Ali? Saeed, have you seen Ali? Or have you seen Ali, Saeed? In this case, there are 3 people. The speaker, there is Saeed that the speaker is talking to, asking about Ali. So 1 and 2 are the same, basically. But look at this. If you delete the comma between Saeed, Ali, and Saeed, it changes the meaning. Have you seen Ali Saeed? Have you seen Ali Saeed? Ali Saeed is one person. You're asking somebody not mentioned here about a person named Ali Saeed. And again, English teachers love to use this example. They say, use commas properly, save lives. If you say, let's eat, grandma. Let's eat, grandma. Let's eat, grandma. هيا نأكل يا جدتي. Here, يا جدتي. Oh, grandma, let's eat. Why don't we eat, grandma? For the second one, let's eat, grandma. No comma, grandma is object. So you're talking to each other about eating your grandma. Don't eat your grandma. So basically, It's the simple sentence, one main clause, two main clauses connected with the fanboys, compound sentence. Now, when you use a subordinator to connect two simple sentences, you create a complex sentence. Warning, the transition signals are not connectors. The prepositions are not connectors. These sentences are all complex. These connectors don't make complex sentences or simple or compound. They can be part of a simple sentence, compound sentence, and complex sentence. We can do a session for exercises and discuss this in more details. So these sentences wrong, wrong, because also and then belong to this category. They don't connect. How can you fix this? Either semicolon before them or full stop, or you use and one of the fanboys before them, like this. Remember, I told you try not to overuse the semicolon. Sometimes if you use it, it's better to use any of these transition signals, so to clarify what the semicolon means, to remove the ambiguity. However, nonetheless, nevertheless, therefore, in addition, additionally, for example, for instance, thus, then, these sentences are correct, compound because of the semicolon. Look at again, to the right of the semicolon, subject verb, to the left, subject verb. Or like this, simple sentence, simple sentence. These sentences are all wrong. This is important because you will be asked in your quizzes and exams to fix problems in such sentences. Okay, these are exercises. Thank you very much. We will have a session for exercises, questions, and answers. I know you will have many questions to ask. Feel free to do this. But don't forget your first assignment. Use any of these sentences here, this sentence or these two sentences, to write it in 30 different ways. Think of like about 10 simple sentences, about 10 compound sentences, and about 10 complex sentences. Thank you very much, and talk soon. Bye bye.